Hello there, good morning, everybody. This is Pastor Shibu John from Toronto, Canada, on the 2nd of April 2025. This morning, we are going to meditate from 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1. Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. Our focal point for today's meditation is impersonators of Jesus Christ. Apostle Paul completes his thought by pursuing the Corinthian believers to follow his pattern for living just as he follows Jesus' pattern for living. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and towards the end of that chapter, you'll get a picture about how Paul was handling or telling his faithful believers or believers in Corinth about the living of a fruitful, peaceful, holy Christian life. In the 10th chapter and 33rd verse, he says, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, so that they may be saved. And why did Paul say, be imitators of me? Paul wasn't being arrogant. He did not think of himself as sinless. At the same time, the Corinthian believers did not know much about the life and ministry of Christ. That's the point. And his right to be recognized and honored as the Son of God, that is Jesus Christ, he refused to demand that position. Again, here the apostle followed Christ Jesus' example and urged his followers or the readers or the believers in Corinth to follow his own. Paul's life matched his words to such an extent that he could make this bold statement, and those who imitated his life became more like Christ Jesus. And you know what? As parents, we should follow Christ Jesus so closely that we can say to our children, imitate me as I imitate Jesus Christ. We are our children's first and most closely observed role models. This does not mean that we have to be perfect, but our lives should be open before them to see all of what Christ Jesus does in us as we rely on his strength for our obedience and his redemption for our failures. In his letter to the Philippian believers, Apostle Paul wrote, the things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. We read that in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 9. As followers of Jesus Christ, think about it. It's so basic when you really meditate on that. This is our identity. We are followers of Christ and we have been crucified with Christ Jesus, to use the language from Galatians chapter 2 and verse 2. It was because of a revelation that I went up and I submitted to them the gospel which I preach among the Gentiles. But I did so in private to those who were of reputation, for fear that somehow I might be running or had run in vain. We no longer live. Christ lives in us. A life we live now, this is for every one of us as Christian believers. Again, we live by faith in the Son of God who loved us and gave himself for us. Like the whole purpose of our life, day in and day out, summarized in the initial invitation from Jesus Christ to his disciples. Matthew chapter 4 and verse 19 says, and he said to them, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now, the question here is, what have our children learned and received from us? What have they heard us say? And what have they seen us do? Remember, if we are imitating Christ, they will have learned, received, heard, and seen Him. And the promise is that God's peace will be in their hearts. Have a very blessed day, and God be with you.